Hello, everyone. Welcome to day two of We Give Summit. My name is Sara Lomelin, she, her pronouns, and I'm the CEO of Philanthropy Together. I couldn't be more thrilled for today's session, A World of Change, Global Stories of Collective Giving. Philanthropy Together is a global nonprofit organization to grow and strengthen the collective giving movement. As an organization, we have had the honor and privilege to visit with giving circles, collaborative funds, and ecosystem builders around the world to raise awareness about collective giving. And I have seen firsthand how this movement is growing and thriving in different pockets of the world. Our travels and the many conversations we have had were the inspiration for this session. And I am super excited to invite you to join me for a trip around the world in the next hour. Throughout today's session, please engage with us in the chat and be mindful of our We Give Summit community guidelines. Today's session is just the start of conversations about collective giving around the world. We invite you to join us for collective conversations with today's speakers to build connections and have discussions that are grounded within the local context of your region. We'll share more details throughout the session on how to join this. Please be sure to answer our two-question poll within our event platform, Huba, to share any thoughts and questions you are bringing to We Give Summit. With that, let's get started. To begin, we're taking a trip to Latin America, where collective giving is gaining momentum. In Mexico, through partnerships with community foundations, we have seen new giving circles emerge. Institutions, as well as everyday people, are planting seeds and using collective giving as a spark to build infrastructure and activate communities in places where more formal philanthropy may still be developing. Something Giving Tuesday's leader, JP Vergueiro, spoke about at We Give Summit 2023. Across Brazil, local leaders are coming together and creating space for generosity that is reflective of local values and voices. Today, we're joined by Jonatas Acevedo with Rede com Moi, who will tell us more about this. Welcome, Jonatas.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Hi, everyone. My name is Jonatas Acevedo. I'm currently Executive Director at Rede com Moi, or Com Moi Network. Com Moi Network gathers 18 independent grant-making organizations in Brazil that fund the struggles of civil society actors for human rights, social environmental justice, and community development all over Brazil. So philanthropy in Brazil, especially private and family philanthropy, tends to be quite conservative. Instead of supporting initiatives led and created by civil society actors and their struggles for rights, private foundations prefer to create their own projects and direct most of their funding to less contentious or less political issues. According to research by GIFI, the biggest philanthropic association that gathers companies, corporate, and family foundations, out of the 4.9 billion reais invested by philanthropic organizations in Brazil, only 800 million went to civil society organizations. Data has also shown to us that 2.1 billion reais were directed to funding foundations' own projects and initiatives, while 1.8 billion were directed to third parties. When it comes to thematic areas, education, entrepreneurship, and income generation are the top two themes. And regarding the volume of investment, almost 2 billion reais out of the 4.9 were invested in education projects. Meanwhile, projects related to democracy and defense of rights and the institutional strengthening of civil society organizations and movements received, respectively, 245 million and 172 million reais. As threats against hard-won rights and democracy grow, one has to question why philanthropy in Brazil continues to not support such agendas. And that is like an overview of how philanthropy context has been playing here in Brazil. When it comes to Com Moi and our collective giving groups, Com Moi has currently 18 members. Most of our member organizations were created from the 2000s onwards, a period characterized by a decrease in the presence of international cooperation and philanthropy in Brazil, motivated by this understanding that the country had a stable and developing economy after years of re-democratization, and that this gave Brazil a more solid democracy with more structured and consolidated institutions. Data shows, for example, that the average annual contribution of resources from international organizations to Brazil in 2010 was almost 50% lower than in the previous year. So this process of withdrawal of resources considerably reduced the funding for civil society organizations and initiatives focused on social justice and human rights. The situation also impacted the financial sustainability in those fields, even leading to the definitive closure of civil society organizations and other community initiatives that did not automatically find national sources of funding. So many of our member organizations emerged in this context based on the perception that there was a need to increase resources for the field of social justice and human rights. So they were founded by activists themselves who had an in-depth knowledge of the demands and needs of the movements and worked to create an adequate infrastructure to respond to the lack of funding of civil society. So Comoa Network was founded in 2012 as a response to this scenario that I was just telling you of the philanthropic landscape in Brazil that does not support the strengthening of civil society and the struggle for rights. So our mission since our inception has been to promote and advocate what we call community and social environmental justice philanthropy as a way to amplify the amount of resources allocated for human rights and social environmental justice fields. Through our advocacy, we aim to influence the philanthropic field, both in Brazil and abroad, to be actual partners of the main protagonists of change and transformation, which are civil society and social movements. And when it comes to the future of collective giving in Brazil, as Ailton Krenak has said, an indigenous leader from the Krenak community, the future is ancestral. So for us to talk about the future of collective giving here in Brazil, it might lead us not to look forward, but to look back at what our indigenous quilombola communities, for instance, have been promoting as collective practices of giving and care for centuries now, as tools of resistance against colonial violence and exploitation. So the future of collective giving in Brazil has also to do in strengthening communities and movements organizing and trusting the work that those civil society actors have been doing to defend our hard-won rights. At Comoa, we believe community and social environmental philanthropies are an alternative for us to continue resisting, to continue dreaming, and to continue to believe that we are not doomed, that other ways are still possible. Thank you so much, and I'll pass back to Sarah.
Jonathas, thank you so much for a powerful reflection on how your collaborative fund is taking root in Latin America. Your work is building the foundation for long-term people power change. If you are in Latin America and would like to go deeper around what is happening in Brazil and the rest of the region, join Jonathas and his colleague Jasmine for a collective conversation tomorrow, May 15 at 11 a.m. Brazil time. Next, we're taking a trip to Europe, where philanthropic leaders are recognizing that institutional philanthropy alone won't solve some of communities' largest challenges. We need everyday people at the heart of the work, and we need community. From Germany to France to Italy to Spain to the UK, we have trained and partnered with leaders to help new giving circles start. A big shout out to Felix Rosevsky and Michael Albert Siebeck, who were one of our earliest graduates of our Launchpad training program and who have helped train and build a network of giving circles in Germany, Hungary, and Austria. Giving circles are really a flexible and adaptable model, and there are creative ways to spark collective giving in your community, much like the funding network model that invites people to experience giving together and create connection and learning with special events. Today, we have Eugenie Harvey with the Funding Network joining us. Welcome, Eugenie.
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about the work of the Funding Network. The Funding Network is a small UK-registered charity or non-profit, and we are a form of giving circle. We describe our work as live crowdfunding events, but they are essentially based on the concept of a giving circle. The Funding Network was founded 22 years ago by 4 friends, a doctor, an art dealer, and a real estate agent, and someone who had inherited a lot of money. They were very, very different people, but they shared one thing, and that was a frustration about the limitations of their own ability to make a difference in the world. And they had the idea that if they pooled their funds, if they pooled their money into a single pot and they decided together on organisations that they would support, they would have a greater impact because they were doing it collectively. Their money would pack a greater punch. They also thought that they would enjoy their giving more if they did it with others. It would be social and fun and celebratory and interesting and stimulating and educational and all those sorts of things. So they wanted to have an experience of giving which was uplifting and exciting, all of those sort of things. And so they had the idea of inviting small organisations to come to an event and to make a 6-minute pitch talking about the work they do, the difference they make, and how they would use a grant of £10,000 if that amount was to be raised. And they came up with the idea of inviting 3 organisations at a time and of inviting their friends and colleagues and family members to come along and to hear these pitches and to join forces with them if they wanted to in raising amounts of £10,000 or more for each of 3 organisations. The model or the event format has been described by many people as part TED Talk, that's the 6-minute pitch, part Shark's Tank or Dragon's Den here in the UK, which is to say the opportunity to talk to and answer questions from people who are interested in supporting you or in investing in your work, and part live auction. And that's at the end when people have heard from the organisations, asked the questions, they're invited to raise their hand and to pledge amounts of as little as £10, which is about $20, up to, well, there's no limit. You can give away as much as you want, but I think the largest single amount we've ever received is £10,000 and everything in between. Most people are giving a few £100s to each of the organisations. So that has been going, we've been doing that for 22 years, and we now organise 12 events a year here in the UK. When they started, they only organised 2 or 3 events a year, but now we have a membership, we have a wider network of supporters, and we organise 12 events a year, which are hosted by big companies that provide the hospitality and the tech and employee volunteers to help with the events, which happen in the evening. And we do that 12 times a year. And we have, over the last 22 years, supported several hundred UK registered charities and engaged hundreds, if not thousands, of donors of all sizes in contributing towards raising over £10 million here in the UK for these small organisations. About 12 years ago, we were really thrilled to be approached by the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, which a number of you will know, I'm sure, who were interested in asking us to deliver training and coaching in our model to their grantees in Central and Eastern Europe at that stage, where they were looking to reinstate the practice of philanthropy and re-engage people in charitable giving. So we started working in Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey, and over the last 12 years, that has spread to 30 countries around the world, delivering events based on the model I described. And that's, Australia, New Zealand, Colombia, Hungary, Romania, Turkey, Germany, Italy, North Macedonia, the list goes on. And while the events sound quite different because they're obviously in the local languages, they look exactly the same. Pictures, questions, and then the auction at the end. And that international network of groups organising events based on this model has in turn raised millions of pounds, dollars, euros for hundreds of small grassroots organisations. This is our most recent impact report, and I'm going to ask the guys to link to it so that you could read the digital version if you want to see more about our work. Our website is under review, so don't look at that. It's a bit of a disaster zone at the moment. I want to finish by talking about why I think this is so important, because obviously these events, these giving circles, they're hugely labour intensive. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of very positive things about them, but it is hard work. There's no getting away from it. I won't sort of bring us all down by talking too much about the problems that we face in the world right now. I think we all know them only too well. But I will say that in the face of overwhelming challenges and problems and injustice and all the concerns that we read about in the paper every day. In the face of that, finding ways to bring people together and connect with others who share their concerns, to hear from people who are living with the problems and the challenges daily, to hear from them firsthand, to ask them questions, to create the space for people to tell their stories in their words without the media manipulating what they're saying, or just giving people the dignity to tell their stories and others to listen to them. That's what we do. And giving circles create the opportunity for people who care to come together and to be connected with one another and to have a greater impact than we can on our own. And it's for that reason that I am so passionate about the methodology. I think spreading it around the world so there are hundreds and thousands of small groups of people coming together, increasing their impact and finding strength in one another. That is what we need to deal with the scale of the problems and the anxiety that we all experience when we read about and experience daily the challenges in the world. So if you are already organising, running, Giving Circle, just fantastic solidarity to you. And if you're thinking about it, please do keep thinking about it. If you would be interested in finding out more about our work, or if we could help you in any way, do reach out. I extend an open invitation to anybody to come to any of our events in London. As I said, there are 12 a year. And equally, if you're in other parts of the world, get in touch with us and we can tell you about the local partners in your country. I think I'll leave it there. It's been a real pleasure to share that with you. And thank you very much for your attention. And I will hand back to you now, Sarah, with many, many thanks. Bye.
Eugenie, thank you so much for joining us and being part of this discussion and for leading work across Europe and other parts of the world. It is inspiring to see so many new pathways opening up for everyday givers. To be in discussion about collective giving in Europe, join a collective conversation tomorrow with Eugenie at 3 p.m. British Summer Time. I have very fond memories from Philanthropy Together's last time in Europe. Last spring, I attended Skull World Forum in Oxford to present alongside our Chief Strategy Officer, Isis Krauss, about the growth and collaborative funds throughout Africa. Africa is home to some of the most exciting and community-rooted examples of collective giving. Here are some photos from the African Philanthropy Forum in Morocco last October. We love witnessing this energy up close, hearing the conversations around collaboration and care. From feminist funds to youth-led initiatives, we're seeing philanthropy be reclaimed across the continent, with leaders telling their own stories, mobilizing their own resources, and building local infrastructure on their own terms. And this narrative change work is happening across geographies and issue areas, including the climate justice space. Today, we're joined by Betty Osei-Bonsu with Green Africa Youth Organization, or GAYO. Welcome, Betty.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here. My name is Betty Osei-Bonsu. I serve as the Director of Operations and Programs at the Green Africa Youth Organization. We are a youth-led organization dedicated to environmental sustainability and economic development across Africa. We've been in operation for the past 10 years now, and our work spans across policy advocacy to research, innovation, and green entrepreneurship, all rooted towards the commitment of empowering young people as change makers. One of our proudest milestones is the launch of the Africa Climate Youth Fund, a groundbreaking platform designed to provide direct financial support and capacity building to youth-led climate initiatives across the continent. What is the philanthropic context in my region? I think from my end, and following what I have observed for the past 10 years that I've been in the space, the philanthropic landscape in Africa is currently evolving. It's dynamic, it's diverse, yet it's profoundly marked by systemic imbalance in how resources are allocated and who gets to decide where they go. Historically, external donors have heavily influenced philanthropic capital on the continent, often with top-down structures prioritizing foreign design intervention over locally led solutions. And just to think about it, less than 1% of global climate finances reaches youth-led organizations directly, and even less reaches grassroots or community-based actors who are closest to the problems of the climate crisis. This creates a stark disconnect between where climate solutions are needed the most and where funding is flowing to. At the same time, Africa youth comprise over 60% of the population. This is a demographic with the most energy, the most innovation and proximity to the problem, yet they remain underfunded and excluded from mainstream climate finance. There's a growing recognition that traditional giving models are ineffective in building long-term resilience. And you observe that philanthropy in Africa nowadays is currently shifting towards more inclusive and participatory models, but progress still remains slow. Youth-led and community-driven movements are increasingly demanding not just funding, but power to shape solutions, to define priorities, and lead implementation. However, you also identify that many institutional philanthropies still lack the mechanism or the risk appetite to support youth-led change in non-traditional ways with support limited to restricted funding alone. So this is a huge problem for us. And this is where we brought about the Africa Climate Youth Fund that is positioned to address this gap and shift towards equity-driven, bottom-up climate philanthropy. Our approach is rooted in reimagining philanthropy, not as a charity, but as a solidarity. We are positioning young people as beneficiaries and leaders, designers and co-investors in the change. We are seeing the early signs of the movement, and we are happy that this is going to gain momentum and spread across Africa. Having that mindset of it's not just only about who gives, but how they provide and whether power and resources are being redistributed in a just, sustainable, and transformative way. And now just to reflect on how this and why our collective giving group was founded, why the Africa Youth Climate Fund was founded. We founded this to respond to the funding ecosystem that has persistently failed to reach youth-led climate solutions in Africa, particularly those in the marginalized and under-resourced and frontline communities. It's a youth for youth mechanism, when you talk about the fund, built by Africa youth who have first-hand experience of the funding barriers and systematic neglect that youth initiatives face. So our model is centered across collective giving and participatory grant making. And our thematic areas are entrepreneurship and innovation, movement building, as well as research and knowledge. What we are trying to do is to support youth-led enterprises that provide circular economy solutions, climate tech, agroecology, and climate and clean energy projects. In terms of movement building, we are looking at investing in youth organizing, policy advocacy, and public engagement campaigns that amplify climate voices. And when you talk about research and knowledge, we're looking at funding community-based research and documentation to inform policy and practices from youth perspective. Since the inception, the Africa Youth Climate Fund have been able to fund various institutions with average grant size of 15,000. Yes, this is minimal, but we are looking how can we create a sustainable funding mechanism for young or youth-led climate initiatives across Africa. And this spans from eco-enterprises to NGOs, tackling from waste problem to advocacy initiatives. And now just to talk about what the future of collective giving looks like. The future of collective giving in Africa is deeply tied to the continent's broader socioeconomic trajectory. As we face escalating climate threats, youth unemployment, political instability, and deepening inequality, we believe the most effective giving model will be local, inclusive, and generative. We realize that the future we need is more localized regranting structures that allow communities to control resources, capacity building for grassroots organizations to manage and absorb funding, and shared learning spaces to scale what works and avoid duplication of efforts. And as well, provide trust-based model that replace heavy compliance with relationship-driven accountability. At the end of the day, the future of collective giving in Africa is not just about distributing money. It's about building movement. It's about transforming power. It's about restoring dignity. And through the Africa Climate Youth Fund, we are modeling a path forward where climate finance is just, it's youth-led, and is rooted in the very community it seeks to serve. Thank you.
Betty, thank you for sharing your passion for climate and philanthropy and for reminding us what is at the root of being a philanthropist. To be in conversation with Betty and her colleague Jemima to discuss collective giving in Africa, join tomorrow at 2 p.m. GMT. Okay, next we're heading down under to Australia. There is a philanthropic evolution happening, and collective giving is at the center of it. Last summer, in just 2 weeks across 3 cities, we engaged with university networks, wealth advisors, Jewish funders, community foundations, and grassroots leaders to deepen collective giving within their communities. There is such momentum building with growing government support for philanthropy, and it is truly a shared effort that is leading to shared impact throughout the country. I am so excited to welcome Wayne Green with Philanthropy Australia to tell us more about what's happening. Wayne, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It is an absolute pleasure to be with you. And thank you so much for giving me the time to share a little bit about what's happening down under in Australia. So I'm based here in Melbourne and am working with an organization called Philanthropy Australia, which is the peak body for philanthropy, which really helps to generate more and engaging philanthropy. And really, it's about how do we elevate the opportunities in the sector for people to engage more and to think about the best way possible to do philanthropy at its core. In Australia, it's really exciting right now because there are a number of initiatives and opportunities where the sector is really thinking about how do we explore philanthropy and how do we engage people to do it better and how do we encourage more people in the sector to explore and do giving. One of the key things that is quite interesting about Australia is that the culture of giving is definitely here, but the way that we talk about giving is quite nuanced in that it isn't something that people often talk about openly. It is kind of a thing that sort of happens sometimes in the background, sometimes people in more private spaces, and it isn't part of the collective narrative of conversation that happens in this country. And I think we're moving towards that, and certainly the opportunity with giving circles. And as that grows, I think really will offer a groundswell of opportunity for us to really think about how do we offer people to navigate and talk about money and giving in a way that actually elevates their giving and elevates the opportunity for more people to get connected into this work. Some exciting opportunities that are really happening here, and why I really think there is this groundswell is a couple of things that are currently in operation. One is we have an amazing initiative called She Gives. This is where this spark of idea about how do we engage more women in giving, how do we think about elevating their voices, how do we showcase their experiences and offer them a platform to really engage more in the community. And so She Gives is incredible opportunity, and that has engaged people throughout the country, and also Philanthropy Together is part of this initiative, really to elevate the opportunities for women to give and how do we engage them more. The other exciting thing is that in Australia, we actually are going to be doing some research into collective giving to really understand what does the landscape look like right now, what is the current status of play that we have in Australia, and how do we actually think about building the infrastructure and the supports that need more opportunities for collective giving. Philanthropy Australia is also going to be delivering a new initiative called the Philanthropy Leadership Summit that is happening later this year in Canberra. So if you're around, make sure that you apply to get to that program. It's an incredible opportunity for us to actually look at the moment right now and say there are so many issues in the world, so many things that are happening that are influencing Australia locally, globally, and how do we elevate and think about who the people are that are taking leadership opportunities in the sector, and how do we bring them together to really learn and participate in a program that ensures they're the best ones placed to do this work. So some of the things that are also happening here in Australia and around collective giving specifically is a couple of weeks ago, we launched Impact 100 here in Melbourne. And this is for those of you who are already involved in Impact 100 in the US. In Australia, it's slightly different in that it's a group for men and women. And this is now being hosted by the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation here in Melbourne. There are other Impact 100 groups throughout the country. And this is a really exciting opportunity for us to actually gather people together to really understand how we're offering place-based funding back into the community. You know, the opportunity so far is we've already got, I think, 20-something people that have signed up just in the first couple of weeks, which is super exciting. And it's about how do we socialize this experience more into the community? How do we get more people to navigate and connect into what it means to do philanthropy? And so I think one of the interesting things is people are, when you talk to them, are excited about it, but there also is a little bit of reluctance because there isn't a strong sense of what giving circles are. And so this is really an opportunity for us to embrace this experience here in Melbourne and really push it out more into the community so we have more people navigating and getting involved in this space. I think one of the things that is really critical is that there is going to be some research in Australia around collective giving. And I think as we push the research out and get more of the Giving Circle community to participate and collective giving opportunities to do the research, the more that we'll actually be able to share the story of what collective giving is and how people can actually get involved. I think the other thing too is that because Australia is relatively younger than sort of in comparison to the US, we are still looking at what are the best opportunities for collective giving. So community foundations in Australia is an incredibly exciting opportunity because it is growing exponentially in this country. And as more community foundations grow, I think they're going to be setting up the opportunities for collective giving and giving circles to be established. Right now, we have an interesting system of what's called a public ancillary fund, and under that, you can set up sub-funds, and that's where the opportunity is, where collective giving can sit. And I think as the sector builds with philanthropy and more opportunities come up into how we do giving, I think the community foundations is going to play a significant part in elevating the opportunities for us to do more collective giving. The other thing that I think is really interesting is that we have really interesting models of how we do collective giving. So there are opportunities to do a giving circle that is structured under a community foundation or within other organizations where they're establishing them, as well as the opportunities for us to think about where else in the sector we can do this work. So for me, it's really exciting that these things are happening in Australia. It is so wonderful to be embraced by this community of givers and to think about how do we best place the way forward for more giving and more collective opportunities for people to network and navigate and be excited in the joy of what it means to give. And so with that, I know my time is wrapping up. And so I just really want to say an amazing thank you to Philanthropy Together for this incredible opportunity. And I know this summit is going to be fantastic for everyone to participate in.
Thank you, Wayne. It was so great to be with you during my time in Australia. Thank you for breaking down all of the cross-sector collaborations that are happening and where the opportunities exist. And if you're in Australia and would like to be in conversation with other philanthropy leaders in the country, please join Wayne at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight, which is 11 a.m. Australia Eastern Standard Time, tomorrow morning on May 15th. All right, we're heading into our final stop on our world tour. In Asia, we're seeing some of the most structured and expansive models of collective giving. India, in particular, stands out with the work DASRA is leading, partnering with the government to support community organizations. DASRA hosts collaborative funds and it's supporting hundreds of organizations. These are some photos from DASRA's Philanthropy Summit last year. Meanwhile, in Singapore, collective giving has taken root after a pilot program has now grown into a government-backed national effort. We were so happy to be there at the beginning of it. It is really a testament to what's possible when systems align through shared giving. To share about their work in Singapore, we have Adele Tay with the National Philanthropy and Volunteer Center. Welcome, Adele.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I'm Adele, and I'm currently the head of Philanthropy Innovation and Partnerships at the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center, or NVPC, in Singapore. So I'd just like to start off by saying a huge thank you to Philanthropy Together and Sarah for inviting me to be here to be part of the We Give Summit. So Singapore is very new to the collective giving space. So I'm really excited to be here and to have the opportunity to learn and connect with others from around the world. So in Singapore, the way we think about giving is starting to shift at a really interesting turning point. So traditionally, when people think about philanthropy here, they picture wealthy individuals or big organizations, giving large amounts of money to support causes. So like building a school or helping to feed those in need. Also at the same time, Singapore's government has done a great job of providing strong support systems over the years. So because of that, it's easy for people here to feel like community or personal giving is just something extra or something nice to do, but not really essential. But I think that mindset has been changing over the last few years. So more and more Singaporeans, especially the younger generation, are stepping up. They want to be active participants in creating change and not just being passive donors. We're also seeing a lot of collaboration happening, so between funders, companies, and government agencies. So people are really coming together to pool resources and think more strategically about how to create long-term impact. So based on our 2021 NVPC individual giving study, we found that most donations and volunteering in Singapore are still largely occasional. So we started wondering, what if we could encourage everyday Singaporeans to give in a more sustained and personal way? So this was what led us to pilot giving circles back in 2023. So just about 2 years ago, we wanted to create a way for giving to be more relational, more accessible, and more community-driven, and also help people build lasting connections as they give. So the idea for giving circles is that each circle is made up of a small group of people, usually 6 to 8 members, and they commit to supporting a family in need for 6 months. And it's not just financial support. The members help the family in many ways, such as befriending, mentoring, medical escort, providing emotional support, and more. And many of the families that we work with have unique multiple needs and are facing complex challenges such as financial difficulties, caregiving stress, social isolation, mental health struggles. And because each giving circle is made up of a group of people, the responsibility of supporting the family doesn't just fall on one person. It's shared among the group, which makes it much more manageable and sustainable for everyone involved. So over the last 2 years, we've actually grown from a pilot of 5 circles to 18 giving circles involving over 100 volunteers who have journeyed with and supported 18 families in need. So I'd like to share a story of one of the families, Madam Cheng, who was actually featured in our local news. So this is a photo of Madam Cheng. She's 65 years old, and she's a full-time caregiver for 3 people. So firstly, her elderly mother, who is in her 90s, her husband, who is 72 years old. So he had an accident over 10 years ago and is now bedridden and is unable to walk on his own and is wheelchair bound. She also cares for her adult son, who is 30 years old. He has autism and intellectual disability. So when we first met her, she told us that she didn't even have the right to die or to fall sick. Because if she did, who would take care of her family? She was exhausted, she was isolated, and she had sunk into depression. But together with our charity partner, we match up a group of volunteers in a giving circle. And I'll show the next slide with photos of the family with her circle members. So the photo on the left, you can see Madam Cheng here. On the right, with her son in front of her, and the circle members visiting her on a Saturday afternoon to engage her son in board games and give Madam Cheng some respite. So the circle also helped to raise funds for essential items such as a hospital bed and adult diapers for her husband. They also visited her regularly, kept her company, engaged her son in games and activities, and made her feel less alone. The other photo on the right was when the circle members went down to paint her home for Chinese New Year, because when they visited, they found the walls were very moldy and cracked, and they wanted to do something nice to celebrate the New Year with her. And after a few months of support from the Giving Circle, Madam Chen shared with us that it feels like someone is there to catch you when you fall. And she's now more hopeful and has less uncertainties for the future. And so that's the hope. We'll see many more stories like Madam Cheng's, where giving circles create impactful and meaningful change in someone's life. So I really believe that the future of giving in Singapore is going to be more participatory and more relational. In a recent national giving study by NVPC, we found that what mattered most to volunteers was knowing that their contributions made a difference. They didn't want to just give and not know what happened after. They wanted to see the impact of their money, time, and effort. And that's what Giving Circles offers: direct connection with the families they are supporting and visible impact in the lives of those in need. And we also see a huge potential for scaling this Giving Circle model nationally. But to do that, we also need to shift the narrative of how people view philanthropy. Being a philanthropist isn't just for the wealthy and for those with deep pockets. It's about giving whatever you have to offer, and everyone has something to contribute, not just your money, but what we call the 5 T's: time, talent, treasure, ties, and testimony. And we've seen an incredible impact that can happen when people come together to give what they can to support others in need, just like the story of Madam Cheng. So in closing, I just want to thank Philanthropy Together again for letting me share this little glimpse into Singapore's collective giving journey. We're still very much at the start of our Giving Circles journey, but I'm hopeful and excited for what's to come, because we've seen firsthand the power of collective giving and the transformation that takes place, not just for the families, but also for everyone involved. So thank you so much. I'll pass over the time to Sarah. Thank you.
Adele, thank you for being here. It brings me such joy when I think about the time spent together training community leaders and discussing the possibilities of giving circles throughout Singapore. Thank you for showing us how intentional design and cross-sector alignment can create deep and lasting impact. The momentum in Asia is truly, truly inspiring. To keep the conversation going, we invite anyone in Singapore and throughout Asia to join Collective Conversations with Adele tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 9 a.m. Singapore time tomorrow on May 15th. As we close, I'd like to again thank all of today's speakers: Jonatas, Jeannie, Betty, Wayne, and Adele. Thank you for being here and sharing your stories and perspectives. What's coming up for me is this affirmation around what many of us know deep down, and that is that collective giving is universal. And no matter if you're in a rural village or a global city, whether you're giving $1 or 10,000, you can make a difference and support your community. Collective giving is proof that generosity has no borders. So here's our invitation to you: start a conversation. Collective giving builds a more connected world. So call a friend today and share with them something you learned, and then keep the conversation going. With that, again, please join us for Collective Conversations, which are breakout rooms discussions around a variety of topics and regions. Each of today's incredible speakers will be hosting a conversation, so please join us. We look forward to seeing you at more sessions today. Our next session is today's keynote session with the incredible Hallie Lee in conversation with me in Democratizing Philanthropy, One Kitchen Table at a Time, at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. See you there.